Hi there, Linda K. Gifford here. I'm a CSA survivor and coach, and we are wrapping up day 5 of the P in Spades. Spades is the Surviving in Spades guide that I just put together, the simplified to 6 things that I do every day that's really easy to remember, that helps me to overcome and nearly avoid CPTSD. I mean, nobody ever 100% avoids CPTSD once you've got it, but I've really tamed the beast. I'm saying, okay, I've got to sit cross-legged in my chair and I'm rolling away. All right. I have a broken foot. I'm supposed to be in this boot, but I've got my toes taped together, and since I'm not walking, I can do this. Separating the past from the present is the P in Spades, but I'm going to run through them all so you get the gist of where we're going with this if you're new. And just because if you're not new, if you've been tagging along since I started this TikTok channel on March 1st, and I just started live streaming a week ago, then it's good to ingrain it. It's good to just say them over and over, because that's, again, these are 6 things I do, and if you just kind of memorize them, super easy. S, the shame is not yours. And we spent nearly a week, although I started in the middle, but we always touch on this. Basically, we touch on every letter every day, but for the purposes of learning how to be consistent in your approach to dealing with your CPTSD, we will spend a great length of time, 1 week at a time, on each letter. So the shame is not yours. We've spent this entire week on separating the past from the present and breaking apart the various ways that that you encounter the past in your present life, essentially, I think is what we've been doing. And I'll recap that after I go through Spades. The A in Spades is next week, and that is asking for what you want, not just taking what's giving. It's just so important that you learn to ask for what you want in life. And I mean, across the board, from the boardroom to the bedroom, I like to say. One needs to not just take what's given. And survivors, we have this habit of just falling into wanting someone to like us so much that if somebody that we think on the surface is acceptable, you know, acceptably talented, smart, whatever our things, our check boxes are for a partner, we stop there and we don't worry about whether all their inner, deeper qualities are what we want, because if you're like me, that never even crossed my mind to think about that. All I thought about after the point that I found somebody to be a potential acceptable partner for me was, what's wrong with me? How do I be perfect? What do I do to make them happy? And I just tried like hell to make them happy, you know? And I guess the difference is I still have CPTSD, and I always will, but now I'm making me happy. And I really mean, in my heart and soul, there's been a switch, a real switch that happened when I started writing my book after my blackout a couple years ago, and just the respect. I mean, I gotta say, my deep, dark, dirty secret, I was ashamed to make that post, but I was so traumatized and I so wanted to out my ex-brother-in-law that I put that post on Facebook with the intention of making sure everybody would see it. And I was such a wuss that I was indirectly wanted my niece and nephew to find out so they would protect their children, or consider protecting their children, because I didn't think that, I don't know, I didn't think we could have that conversation. And I'm not a perfect person. I wasn't ready for it for decades, you know. I've avoided my niece and nephew, who I was a babysitter for when these things were happening to me, because what they don't know is I kind of considered them like my children, and I was so tied up into the situation by the time I was an older adolescent, early teen, that I felt like that was my place. You know, I became like a child mistress, but still, that doesn't mean I had, you know, was happy about the sexual aspect of it. I very much didn't like any of that. It's all super confusing when you're a child. So anyway, niece and nephew never reached out, but I did hope that by posting this, that was one thing that would happen. And I did actually message my niece yesterday and heard back from her today. And I'm just going to straight up say it. You know, she said she's an adult, you know, with children of her own, adolescent, teenage children. And they're like, she said, thank you for reaching out, but I don't want to hear about it. My dad he's been nothing but a wonderful father and grandfather. A hard worker. Sorry about that. It turns out my phone has so little charge because I was working in the bathtub as usual before this afternoon. One of the perks of working on the phone is I can work in the bathtub for hours, and I love to be in water. And as a CSA survivor, I have found other people take exorbitant amounts and lengths of baths. So I guess it's not just me, but I just feel very safe and comfortable there. My battery, my memory might crash, it says, because I'm using too much whatever on there. Give me a memory, which may cause the system to crash. Please close apps running in the background to free up memory. Okay, there were like 100 things open on my phone. Considering I run an e-commerce business and am founding a charity and a whole shopping platform, the Earth 2.0 fundraising family of shops that I've bought a whole bunch of URLs to open charitable shops under, it's like you'd think I would do better with an iPhone. You just would. But if I crash again, I'm going to give it 10 or 15 minutes and come back, because we have a lot to talk about to wrap up the P in spades today, separating the past from the present. So do not remind me again today, phone. Sorry, I keep getting this prompt on the screen that you can't see. So all the steps we've been talking about all week, separating the past from the present, comes down to several things. And what we're going to do is just quickly run through what we've talked about and break it down. The first thing that happens is that shame rears its ugly head. So I'm going to revert you back to the first step, S. To separate the past from the present, you've got to start with the first step, which is realizing the shame is not yours. And that doesn't mean you're going to tell yourself and feel it in your gut immediately. It means you're going to tell yourself that every day for the rest of your life. I still tell myself that. There are still times when I immediately jump to being embarrassed or shameful about things that I shouldn't be, because that's just where I trained myself to go in regards to myself. You know what I'm saying? The self-talk, the negative self-talk became so prevalent, and I realized it started at the point that my life went out of control, from happy, young, successful girl to pretending, being that person, and also being groomed and eventually assaulted. So I dissociated. And now, just like you, if you're a CSA survivor, or your partner, or the person you work with, if you're a partner or an associated personnel, you you experienced your trauma as a physical reality, as sights, smells, touches. You first encountered that at such a young age that your brain protected you by teaching you to dissociate. And it was a very smart thing to do when you were a little child. And it does not serve you well now, unless you learn how to flip it. And that's something else we talked about a whole day this week that I want to recap. Learning part of separating the past from the present, for me, I discovered in examining everything when I started writing this book. And I think that's where we got cut off. I was saying I had a blackout because of 2 newscasts that I saw at the same time. One where a bus driver he raped a 14-year-old girl, got her drunk and raped her, girl from his bus. And he was 26, and he only got probation and not being allowed to be around children for a while, instead of any kind of jail sentence for raping a 14-year-old. 26-year-old white man. She was a black girl. That shouldn't matter, but you and I know that it might have also factored in. But it's still, no matter what your gender, the laws, and this is what we talked about yesterday, the laws are geared towards making us feel insignificant in our assaults, you know, in our violation. They call it abuse, child abuse, sexually abused. I was assaulted over and over again. I don't call that abuse. I was assaulted. I even changed the name. The original name of my book was Self-Talk, My Continuing Efforts to Survive Childhood Sexual Abuse. And then I was like, that's minimizing. If somebody puts their dick in your body, then you are assaulted. It's assault. Let's call it assault. And that's one thing we need to do. And we're going to talk more about that when we get to the E in SPADES, which is educate and advocate. Educate and advocate. Because if I didn't do that, I literally would lose my mind. If I didn't do what I'm doing now, then I would have too much time to wallow in my past. This is one of the things I do to keep the past in the past, is try to keep moving things towards a better future for other humans. And I'm no longer going to say women and girls, because it's humans. It's every gender. It's everybody. I have talked with and worked with men, women, and many types of other. And it's universal what it feels like to live with the aftermath of having been violated in such an egregious way. And I like to answer questions and comments from the day before and recently. And I do want to add, again, because it came up again yesterday, and yesterday I already answered this, so I'm just going to double down today. Yes, I believe in the death sentence for rapists. If you have not been raped, maybe you don't understand, but you should. I mean, imagine. I don't want to die. Somebody's like, well, death is worse. And because I said, this is what came up yesterday. I said, I'd rather have my head cut off with a knife than be raped. As far as the emotional damage that it did, you know, it's a life sentence. So I'll take that back. Yes, I'd rather be alive. Okay, you got that one. I'll give you that one. I'd rather be alive, but I don't think anybody should have to make choices like that. And unfortunately, women all over this world have to make choices to give of themselves to people and protect people and dismiss their own needs and their own violations in light of the greater good. Just like my niece today, she doesn't want to talk about it because he's been a great dad and grandpa. It's like, and child rapist. He was also pretty good at raping a child, if you want to look at it that way. I don't buy these things, but my son leaves them laying around, and they're really expensive, so I'm not proud. I'll pick up like yesterday's G Fuel off the coffee table, which I just did, and drink it. I'm like, there's $3 worth of crap in there. I'm gonna get me my taurine or whatever. So yeah, I wanted to expound upon what I left it with yesterday. Yesterday we talked a lot about Ketanji Jackson's, I called it trial, but because they were basically trying to put her on trial, but her nomination hearings, and talking about how the law, how she pointed out that always giving out the maximum sentence is not acceptable by those who make the laws, which is the representatives in Congress. They're the ones who set the what's the word I'm looking for? Sentencing. The sentencing requirements, the sentencing tops and bottoms, maximum minimums, and the recommended sentencing. So the recommended sentencing for sex offenders is, I want to get it word for word. I wrote this one down. Was greater but not more than is necessary for the purposes of punishment. Greater than the minimum that is required. No, yeah, greater than the minimum that you can give somebody, but not more than is necessary for the purposes of punishment. That's the guidelines Ketanji Jackson and all the other judges are given when they're making their decisions. Therefore, if you always give out the maximum, people are going to be angry at you too, and say that you're going overboard because it's no more than is necessary for the purposes of punishment. And the reason I wanted to bring this up now is because I was saying, yes, I believe in the death sentence for rapists, and purposes of punishment How much is necessary for the purposes of punishment for a child rapist? How much? Can you really put guidelines? And the other thing that came up yesterday, I want to touch on again, I didn't even realize that, I mean, it makes sense when you think about it, but before the internet, people were sentenced based on the amount of child porn they had, because it was harder. You had to go somewhere and get it. You had to go buy it. You had to have it mailed to you. So they decided that if someone just had a little bit of child porn, that they were not as much of a threat as somebody that had a lot of child porn. And I would beg to differ and say that makes no sense whatsoever, even before the internet. And all at once, whereas in the past, to get a whole lot, they would have had to work at it, and ordered a whole lot, that maybe they should be sentenced lighter. Maybe they're not as dangerous because they can get a lot of child porn easy now. And I'm just like mortified. Are you not mortified by that? And if you're not, let me explain why you should be. Calm down. Okay. You are telling me that a person with a little child porn is not as dangerous as a person with a lot of child porn. A perv's a perv. If you're in sex with children, you're a perv. And then you throw in the third and last thing that came up in the court hearing yesterday and around legal things that I want to talk about today because I want to move on. And the third factor that's also bullshit, it's just bullshit. So they're arguing now about how do we change who is the most threat and who is not the most threat, because now they can get a lot of porn fast, so that makes them not as threatening as when you had to work hard at it. It's like, come on. So throw that one out. And the third and equally upsetting thing to me is that we can even act like there's a degree of acceptability in child pornography, and that we can say that it's okay to look at it, or it's more okay to look at it than it is to make it. So those who just look at it aren't sentenced as hard as those who make it, which on the surface, even I can say, well, that kind of makes sense. But then wait, back out and consider the topic. This isn't a topic where I think we can give gradients at all. Because a person, as Kachan J. Jackson pointed out yesterday, a person who is contributing to the making of porn by watching it, they're providing a market. If you're looking at it, you're providing a market. So while they're arguing those particulars and trying to decide sentencing guidelines, I'm thinking, why can't we just start with just kill them? Okay, just kill them. They're rapists. They like looking at children having sex. Get them out of the gene pool. So if that's hardcore, I might not be the coach for you. But it's the truth. And I'm not going to be the person who sits here and tries to tell you, you need forgiveness in your heart and you need love in your soul. It's like, you do need love in your soul. And you don't need forgiveness in your heart at all. You were violated and raped by a pervert, by a sick adult, and there's no excuse for that. Even sick, I don't like the word sick because they just lean that way. If you can look at a child and want them sexually, there's just something wrong with you. I want you out of the gene pool. That's all. I'm not going to go out and hurt anybody because that is not my place. And I also think prison sounds like a really sucky place to be. So I educate and advocate instead. This is my gun. This is my gun. This is your gun, your mouth and your voice and your vote. Those are your weapons against childhood sexual assault. And you need to use them. You need to use them. It really hurts me. It took me years to, a couple of years after starting to write this book to actually message my own niece, which I did, like I said yesterday. And the idea that she can just they can just discount what he did to me. It's like another news story that really upset me and put me into a PTSD flashback. was a minister, had raped his 13-year-old daughter, had been raping her for years. And he even broke down and confessed. And they didn't give him any jail time. He only got probation because he'd done so much good in the world. As a minister in the community, he'd done so much good that it was okay that he, not okay exactly, but hey, he repented. He raped his daughter for years. I'm like, this is a society we live in. And then, like the Ethiopian Uber driver told me in St. Louis in December, I should realize that we've got it so good, way better here. And you know what? We do. And that's not good enough. If we've got it so much better here, imagine how women in the rest of the world are. Imagine having no control over who you marry or who you have sex with or how you live or where you go. Or, I mean, most women in the world live under some form of marginalization. And I'd say, I don't have statistics, but a huge amount are living under total control by men. So whatever degree of better we've got it here, it's not good enough for me to sit back and not try to do something to make it better here and abroad. So along those lines, this seems like a good time to tell you about my new charity, the Sweet Survivor Rescue Fund. I just made Facebook pages at GoFundMe, Facebook and GoFundMe, and I need to make it a nonprofit. And I just don't have the capital right now. I run a business that buys from women, and we've been slowly recovering from the pandemic, but, you know, I'm barely keeping a roof over my head, to tell you the truth. And I want Sweet Survivor, SWEET stands for Survivors Will End Earth's Trafficking. And the Sweet Survivor Rescue Fund is to provide transportation to people who are in trouble and need out of it. For victims of assault and trafficking, I just want a transportation fund. So I'm looking for people who want to serve on the board of this, and I'm also looking for donations. Please help us out. Live gifts will go there. The first gift that comes in will go to, first gifts that go in will go to our nonprofit fund, which we need, like $300 for that. And that will be very helpful because I've been trying to come up with it and I haven't been able to eke it out of the budget. You can also, well, I shouldn't even tell you this yet. Right now, Feel Good Fair Trade, some of you know my store of 5 years, we're closed until Monday because my son's coming on board as the front end, the marketing, advertising person. And that frees me up to do more of what I'm doing now and to start doing speaking engagements to help people to feel better about themselves and to learn things like back to the top. And what I really want to emphasize in this final day of separating the past from the present, you don't have to wait until you have forgiven your assaulter. And I will never forgive mine, and I don't see why I should. I think that's ridiculous. I'm not worried about going to hell. Don't have any beliefs like that. I love my perception of God and goodness and kindness in the world, and I work with that. And I love the power of belief because believing itself manifests reality. And I love faith because faith makes me have faith in myself and what I'm doing to make it also manifest. But beyond that, the idea that there's anybody out there that lets people get raped and wounded and children hurt and raped and wounded and assaulted and allows presidents to attack other countries and blow up people. This, if there was a God, a conscious God, then I would be that God's enemy because that God is a son of a bitch asshole. So obviously, the only thing that makes sense is that God is goodness and kindness and love and mercy in the world. And I have that. I have that for anybody that deserves it. I'm not going to let my heart be eaten up. And I sleep very well at night. I don't sit around hating on my assaulter. That being said, I don't have any need to forgive him. And neither do you. So if that's your hang up, and a lot of people feel like they can't move on, because I haven't forgiven yet, and they're stuck in their Christian tradition or somebody or their whatever religious tradition that tells them you have to forgive to move on. You need to forgive your dad. Or this is especially hard for people where the person is still circling in their life. To which I tell you, get the hell out. Don't associate with somebody who assaulted you. I don't care if it's your brother or your dad. Maybe if it was the same age sibling and you work it out in counseling or something, but there's no reason for a grown adult to be sexually assaulting a child, and you have no business. One of the people I was talking to the other day has been tasked with burying her stepfather who assaulted her for years as a child. And I was torn up by some people because I said, throw him in a ditch, take the money. What the hell? And he got a job and he started working today at a hardware store, the same one his brother used to work at. And it's very cool. And there's one really close to where we're going to be moving to. So hopefully he'll be able to maybe get a job down there. But that's a whole other thing. So yes, removing the hate from your daily life is important. So then I want to recap along those lines what we talked about the day before yesterday, although I bring it up every day. And there's 3 kind of people, and I want you to be this one. All right? There's 3 kind of CSA survivors. Amongst the other breakdowns, you can break it down many ways, I'm sure. There's the I'm always going to be upset about the past. I'm still wallowing in what happened to me. It still hurts so much emotionally. I'm still overcome by CPTSD experiences in such a way that I fall into that rabbit hole every time of crazy, every time, whatever your deal is, sex, drugs, alcohol, just screaming and crying, breaking things, whatever you're jumping in the rabbit hole of crazy is, these people won't leave it behind. They won't leave it behind, but that's because they haven't really looked at it. They're still trying to shove all of their abuse and their assaults and their memories into their gut and their heart. And so when they start to think about it, they become obsessed and they lose it and they don't have any skills. So they just jump down the rabbit hole, and they're upset. And also in that category are people that don't show any upset or CPTSD about it, but they're just bitter and angry. And they say, this is why I can't love. This is why I can't have a relationship. This is why I'll never be okay. I'll never be okay because this happened to me, period. When I work with people and they never get past that stage, and I'm not a patient person, then I'm like, bye-bye. I wish you well. I think you need that. Those people, you need a therapist. And I'm not putting you down. I was at the stage where I didn't know the things I'm telling you, where I was just overrun, affected by them, and doing all of what I just said to you. So at that stage, I needed a therapist, and I got one. And it was kind of an accident because marriage counseling turned into sexual assault counseling, which I hadn't thought I needed. And then it became very, very important in meeting my first alter, who I had now called little girl, who is the person I associated into when I was being sexually violated so that I wouldn't remember it wholly. I never forgot it, but it allowed me to set it aside. So basically little girl is like this chunk that I wrap up and swallow, stuff that down, right? And so I met little girl in therapy, and that was very important. And it also taught me why I left my first husband, because he called me little girl, and he would call me little girl like in sex. Hey, little girl, come here. And so I felt like, even though he was a super nice guy, I felt like I was being raped because I was stuck in CPTSD experiences almost every time we had sex because of the way he talked to me like a baby. And I never told him that. And I could have told him, and we could have fixed that. I'm not regretting the breakup or anything. Everything happens, I don't believe, for a reason, but it is what it is, and regretting it's pointless. So, and I'm in the best relationship I can ever imagine now. So learning all these things is important. And I'd like to fast track you through a couple decades of the kind of bullshit I put myself through. I really would. So, whoever is telling you you have to totally have forgiveness in your heart, no, you don't. And if they say the only person you have to forgive is yourself, no, you don't. You didn't do anything wrong. The shame is not yours. Back to us. Okay? So, boom. Don't even think about those things. They're not even on your do list. Okay? Shame is not yours. Don't forgive yourself. Don't forgive anybody else. Didn't life just get so much easier as a CSA survivor? Yeah. So now, the flip side of the forgiveness thing, or kind of the same, a linear move to the concept of hate. You can't have hate in your heart. Well, I hate what he did to me. I don't hate him because I see him as a pathetic, also a victim, but not as much as me by any means, but a pathetic excuse of a human and a victim of our society and the way that we sexualize children. And women and mothers sexualize children too. And I talked about this yesterday, and as this is a recap, I do want to throw it in the recap. This is not body shaming. I even wore this shirt specifically today to say, look, I am not ashamed of the fact that I have a body and breasts, and I don't want to hide that. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, that we have certain types of clothing, and it's not even so much the amount of skin as the style that is on a grown woman worn to provoke a sexual response in another human. And when you're doing that and putting miniature sexy clothes on your children, it's still evoking, it's you think it's cute, but it's teaching them at that young age to be sexy. I knew that I was supposed to look sexy before I knew at all what that meant. Didn't we all? Didn't you think you were supposed to be pretty and you're supposed to wear mascara when mom would let you, and you're supposed to look sexy like in the movies, like movie stars, like short shorts or whatever your thing was. You knew that when you were 11, maybe younger now. You knew that when you were 12 at least. But you didn't know that you were provoking a sex response. So I'm just suggesting, let me say, thank God I didn't have daughters. I literally prayed to my God of goodness and kindness and mercy that I did not have a daughter, because I didn't feel equipped to raise a daughter. I have 3 sons. So I have not encountered raising a daughter myself. I now have a daughter. My partner's daughter. My partner has a daughter. And of course, I consider her the newest heart member of my family that I don't know very well yet, but as what I've seen, just love. And I'm thinking now, and he actually told me, he's like, you would be an excellent mother to a daughter. And I was like, wow, that meant a lot, because I never thought I could. I was just terrified with my boys. They've never had a babysitter I didn't know. And when I was on the road singing and playing the flute, I took them with me. Me and my ex did. And I was terrified already just for my boys. And I felt like I couldn't protect someone. And I think that we just need to make it clear to people that it's the whole language of society, not just men. We can't just call our assaulters perverts without also addressing our guilt in allowing them allowing ourselves to sexualize our daughters. And as conversations I had, a friend of mine told me that, I'm just overthinking this, that she's like, Linda, this, you just because of your own experience of assault, and you are looking at it wrong. Other people, when they call the guy they fucked daddy, or other people when their man that wants to have sex calls him little girl, doesn't think anything of that. And I'm like, I know, I'm not disagreeing. I'm saying it's a problem. It's a problem. I know they don't. Don't you see what I'm saying? If you don't change the language of society, if we don't educate and advocate and we'll get to there, that's the E in spades, also ecstasy, then nothing's going to happen. So, enough of that. Separating the past from the present. We've learned, and we're going to dive into it, and my guide really takes it apart step by step. And we've learned to recognize when we are starting to have a CPTSD event take over, and we've learned to stop trying to force it away, but to think about it. Think about it to the point even of doing trauma-focused cognitive behavioral therapy. Put yourself in a peaceful place. Get help if you need it, if you're worried about triggers setting you off, and then draw or write your thoughts about your experience. Instead of not thinking about it, think hard about it. Write it down. And now you're going to make a memory. And the next time that you start to have a CPTSD event, just like you usually do, the memory that saw the words you wrote or the pictures you drew, the memory is going to tell your mind, calm down, let it wash over you. You're having an event. And you can. And you learn to. And it washes over you. And you get back to your life without jumping down the rabbit hole. That time you didn't need drugs or alcohol or crying or breaking down or hospitalization or all the things that happen to CPTSD survivors. Now that you've learned to put it into your memory, it's like here's what it's like. It's like taking all this stuff you stuff in your gut and all this information that you've just like shoved inside you, and filing it away properly. You're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, this is what happened to me. I remember this is this. I remember, okay, I've got a memory. And then you're going to put that file away on your mental shelf. You're not going to put it in your heart, and you're not going to put it in your gut. You're going to put it away on your mental shelf. Now, when you need to access it, I'm serious. Now, when you have a CPTSD event starting, you can access this file on your mental shelf and go, oh, I'm a CSA survivor. My name is Linda Gifford. It's March 25th, 2022, and I am starting to regress into a past experience, and I'm going to stop that now. I remember the experience. That was when I was being violated, but it's not that time now. Now it's now, and I have a different life, and blah, blah. You are going to cheerlead your way through life. And guess what? It's fun. It's not a bad thing. You're a survivor, and you're always going to be a survivor. So you can choose to be pissed off about what happened to you forever, or you can take your anger and educate and advocate and change the world for other people with it. And if someone tells you there's something wrong with you because you won't forgive, tell them, fuck off. I don't have to forgive anything. I'm a great person with a great life. I'm a CSA survivor, and I'm going to survive. I'm not going to let this ruin my life. That's just part of who you are. Your body is a vessel for your soul. You are not your body. Your body can't be ruined. It can't be hurt in that way. It can be physically hurt. It can be taken away from you, but your soul is your soul. And I have actually died and gone to heaven and come back in a suicide attempt. Actually, I'm not going to tell you I know what's next. But I'm going to tell you, I know that my spirit and my soul were separate from my body quite comfortably and happily. So, I want to put that day off for a very long time, but I'm not going to fear it like I used to. Nor am I ever going to feel that I have to live up to some God's expectation of me to have ultimate love in my heart for someone who raped me. So get over that. Whatever that person's, and I'm telling you this because it seems outlandish to me and probably to a lot of people listening, but survivors most often have some family members and people that they don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about it. They want you to just forgive Uncle Joe, forgive your stepfather, forgive your brother. And it's like, if you choose to, okay. If you're okay with that. But that is not a requirement for a healthy and happy life. Just saying. Making sure that you don't internalize the shame, making sure that you experience happiness every day and don't live in the past, and making sure that when the past rears its ugly head, which it will, because that's why we're all here together, we have CPTSD, like it or not. When it does, we can control it, and it can be a blip instead of a blast. That was like so cheesy. I just can't. That was bad. Okay. So bad I should probably write it down. So we have separated the past from the present pretty reasonably well, I think, this week. And all of these techniques will be coming soon in an actual guide that I will be giving away to subscribers, because pretty soon I'm working on all this. I'm about a week out. Pretty soon the Sweet Survivor Rescue Fund will also have a subscription. I started one and then closed it to move it to sweetsurvivor.com, which right now won't go anywhere, but next week it will. So you can support the Sweet Survivor Rescue Fund by live gifts on here. You can like and follow, because the more we get that stuff, the more we can monetize, and the money goes to Sweet Survivor. You can support Sweet Survivor on GoFundMe and Facebook pages. You can support RAIN to help other sexual assault victims become survivors, basically to man the hotlines. And you can come back next week when we're going to talk all about asking for what you want. And we're going to, this is, we touch on intimacy all the time, but we're definitely going to be talking about more serious physical, straight up physical stuff. Where it's hard even for me to get started. When I talk with my coaching people online that I've been working with through this later part of the pandemic, it often comes up that during sex with somebody that you love and want to be having sex with, that you'll have a CPTSD event, and that is super common. And I'd like to say that it never happens to me, but it did happen to me once several months back, and it happened to me once again relatively recently. And I did exactly what I talked about earlier in this. I separated the past from the present in the moment, and I gave myself a moment. And my partner and I even have like a trigger word that lets him know to give me a moment. And then I realized what was happening, and I realized how much I liked what was happening, and I threw away and forgot all about the old memory of the same type of thing happening, but against my will. So here's the problem with we'll talk a lot about this next week, because intimacy problems lead up to our inability to ask for what we want, not only in the bedroom, but everywhere else, right? We just start doubting ourselves. And we're torn between, a lot of people think that a sexual assault survivor is not sexual, but sexual assault survivors, especially those of us who were groomed and coerced, not violently raped, there's still an element of, I'm a human being with feelings and sensations, and I learned to associate, especially in the teen years when things were more hardcore, I learned to associate sexual, even the stuff that one would normally consider a good feeling if it was with somebody you wanted to be with, like to associate that with negative feelings. And that looped I got married and divorced 3 times. I never told any of them that I had the level of violation that I did. I mentioned that yesterday, and all of this came into play, and this is so important for you to bypass all these negative relationships and things, and not do that to yourself, because I know how to tell you not to do it. I know how to help you, and I'm trying to. I hope this is getting through. Like I said, educating and advocating, the E in spades, the reason I talk about this every day and do this is because it's part of my program that I practice. I have to educate and advocate, or else I'll be one of those more angry people. And I don't want to be that angry person who's stuck in anger. And I don't want to be the person in the middle, the 3 types I was talking about, person in the middle, they know what happened to them, and they're like, I'm okay, I'm dealing with it, I know it sucked, I know shame isn't mine, technically, but I'm not going to do any work, I'm not going to educate and advocate, I'm going to shut up. I'm going to accept the status quo. I'm not going to, you know, that person, after a while, they piss me off too. And I'll end up being like, okay, you're ready to be on your own now. A person that I want to work with and that I tend to get tight with and we keep talking are people who I know what happened to me and I'm going to change the world now. I know what happened to me and I'm working on having joyous life and sex myself, with learning to to respect myself. This is something that came up yesterday too, and I had a conversation with someone last night about it. So let me throw this in, and then I think I'm going to wrap up. I always say that, but I never really know when I'm going to wrap up till I do. And I'm thirsty. Hang on. Okay. This came up in conversation last night, I said, and I can't remember what I was going to talk about. Speaking of being entirely human. Oh well, we'll get there. We'll get there. We're going to talk about intimacy-related things and also just life-related things. Learning how to not dive into narcissist pools. Really, survivors, I know narcissist is the buzzword, but it is still the correct one. We dive into narcissistic pools of potential partners because we're trying to be perfect and we oftentimes look really together at first, and they want to adore somebody and they want adoration, and once that fades away fast, you're a survivor just trying to make them happy, and they see you as a human now instead of superwoman, and they don't want you anymore. Because anyway, we're going to talk a whole lot about that stuff. It's the weekend and I'm a Formula One fan, and me and my partner are going to be watching Formula One. So I will talk to you on Monday, and I'll be putting some clips out and some other TikToks over the weekend. So I'll talk to you soon. Do buy the stuff off Facebook Marketplace. You can go through my profile, same name. My last name's Gifford, Linda K. Gifford. That's my profile. And then the Facebook page associated is Linda K. Survived, although I'm changing it to Survives, because I just started this March 1st and went with Survived, and then I'm like, no. I survive every day. I survives, not the. I'll talk to you Monday.